Hey, what's up, everyone? It's Dr. Glenn Vo. I am super excited to have this dentist, this entrepreneur. Welcome to the Emerging Group Practice Podcast, the ultimate hub for unleashing the power within your group dental practice. I'm your host, Dr. Glenn Vo, and together we'll embark on a thrilling adventure to discover revolutionary strategies, breakthrough techniques, and awe-inspiring success stories that will take your practice to the next level. Before we get into this episode, I like to give a shout out to one of our sponsors, Crazy Dental. Now, Crazy Dental, they've been hooking us up with crazy prices when it comes to dental supplies. There's no need to pay more than you're supposed to with your dental supplies. Crazy Dental gives us amazing discounts. Reach out to them and ask for the Nifty Thrifty deal. They have almost everything when it comes to composites, disposables, bond, anything you can think of when it comes to dental supplies. Crazy Dental has the deal for you. I like to say he's like a dental baller, like legit baller. It's Dr. Arrash Ahmadnia. Arrash, what's up, man?
Hey, not much, Glenn. How are you?
Oh man, I'm doing good. So obviously I've been following you for a while. We reconnected at a conference recently, and I'm like, man, I love your story. Your story resonates with, no matter where you are in dentistry, whether you're an associate, where you're like doing a startup or an acquisition, whether you're a seasoned veteran or you're someone thinking about opening multiple practices, your story, man, it resonates with all of us. So I wanted to bring you on. And for those who don't know who you are, maybe they're not on social media that much, right? Maybe their nose is down and they're just doing dentistry. They don't know what's going on. For those who don't know about you, just really quickly, just give us like a quick background, a quick bio here for our listeners.
Sure. I graduated from USC in Southern California in 2005. My mother's a dentist, and I was like, oh, I'm going to go work with my mom in Orange County. And that lasted for about 4 months. And, realistically, within 1 mile of her office, and this is in 2005, she had 67 other dental offices.
Wow.
So there was a lot of dentists, and there was no patients for me. So I ended up looking for an associate position, and I ended up getting a job in Licking, Missouri, and of all places. So the pay was phenomenal. I mean, I was right out of school, and back then, I think, in the California market was about $350 a day was the guarantee, and I brought home like $250,000 my first year, which I was ecstatic with.
Yeah.
After a couple of years, I moved back to California, and I thought I'm going to open my own dental practice. And that was when the 2008 financial crisis happened.
Yeah.
And I bought a practice that was almost entirely union owned, patients, right? And I lost 65% of my patients overnight when they went on strike. And essentially by 2010, I was almost bankrupt. And lots of lessons learned. I had 3 kids at the time, newborn actually. And I found an opportunity back in Missouri. Someone called me and said, there's this dental practice for sale for $40,000 with the building. And I was like, all right, well, let's see how it goes. And I bought it. I had like $5,000 to my name, like in totality, right? And I bought the practice, and within a few years it did well, and we opened up some more practices, and unfortunately life happens, and then I went through a divorce and ended up with full custody of my kids, and that probably slowed us down for a while. But now we have 6 practices, well, 5 practices. We're building our 6th, and I've gotten very involved in real estate and other businesses that I just run across.
I mean, I'm just, the one of the big reasons why I wanted to bring you on is because you're not someone who like hides, mistakes that you've done in the past, the hardships you have gone through, and I think that's really refreshing because so many people, especially on social media, it's like a highlight reel, right? Like, hey, look what I did, look at all these amazing things, and a lot of us, we realize if you've been at this game for a long time, you realize that there's ups and downs, and a lot of the success that people have, the foundation is failure, right? Like there's some kind of failure that happened, you learn some. Let me ask you again, just thinking about what you just said about opening the practice in California, and I opened my startup during that housing crisis. I remember when I opened my practice in 2009, and I was just thinking to myself, I was like, man, this is a lot harder than I thought it would be. And then it just started getting easier because the economy got better and better. But I'm glad that I opened during that time because I was like battle hardened, like I was ready, you know. And
Hmm.
I tell people who like went through this pandemic and they're like, "Oh my gosh, that was nuts." And I tell them, "Look, that's you're battle hardened. Like there's nothing I don't know what else that you're going to run into that just, you're not going to be prepared for. But talk about going through that experience, right? Doing opening that practice in California and then it not working out and then, trying again in Missouri. Talk about that experience and how that prepared you to really make this opportunity in Missouri work out for you.
So, for one, I totally agree with you. I mean, social media, I think, has some amazing benefits for doctors and dentists and everything. But at the same time, most people just put their highlight reels up,
Yeah.
and it could be super depressing. I mean, look, I'm fairly successful in what I do, and sometimes even I look at some people's posts and I'm like, man, am I doing something wrong? Am I not doing it? Am I not doing it right, or what? But from my experience, I can tell you that the number one thing when I bought my dental practice in California in 2008, I saw the financial crisis coming. I mean, a lot of people did,
Yeah.
but I didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
Like, I was just like, well, it's not going to affect me. That was one of the reasons why I bought this practice, is because it had solid union workers, right? $5,000 max insurance. I was like, oh, I'm fine. And I just kept on thinking, I'm fine, until I wasn't fine. That was tough. So, as I move forward, like you said, battle hardened, right? Look into the future, see what's coming. So when COVID came, I kind of saw things starting to shut down, and I was trying to get prepared. So while we were shut down, I started worrying about supply issues, supply chain problems, just from talking to different people. So I stayed up till like 2, 3 in the morning. I would get on phone conferences with vendors in like Singapore and China.
Yeah.
And I started having masks and gloves and PPE drop shipped to my house. So when we were able to open, the caveat was you could only open if you had the proper equipment
Yeah.
in our area, right? I just kept driving to all the offices and dropping stuff off, and we were one of the only offices that could actually open legitimately. And the rest is history. It's been
That's awesome. And again, people wouldn't realize that what you went through, right? Unless you told them or shared your story, and now they know, right? But like if they just have been following you since you've been in Missouri and been opening other practices, they would never have guessed, like, dude, this guy went through that. This guy had some hardships. This guy had those issues. I thought he just started like he had a Midas touch and things started just like taking off and everything. And I think that's so important for people to hear because success, there's a lot of factors that come into play. I made a post recently about one of my assistants didn't get into dental school. She was super depressed about it. And I just told her, I was like, hey, it's not like you aren't qualified, man. You're a lot of it has to do with timing, a lot of it has to do with luck, a lot has to do with being at the right place at the right time. You just got to keep moving forward. And I just love how just listening to your story, like you could have, there's multiple times you could have just given up, right? Like, I mean, there's
oh yeah.
multiple times, right? I mean, you what you just told me here, I can pick like three times there. But for those who are like listening and they're getting kind of inspired by your story, and maybe they're going through something hard, right? Maybe they're going through personal hardship. Maybe they're going through uh, practice hardship. They started a startup, maybe didn't do their due diligence in the wrong place and whatnot. Maybe they're an associate ship somewhere and they're not really getting the pay. For those who are going through those things, what's your advice to them? If they're going through those type of things, what's your advice to them? They're having a hard time right now.
Well, one thing that I would probably tell you, especially in the current social media environment is don't measure your success and your happiness based on other people that you're seeing, right?
100%.
Honestly, right? I mean, because that, like I said, I sometimes it makes me feel inadequate, right? So try to, if you're having some bumps in the road or anything, try to stay away from these type of groups, or use it to inspire you, like try to find mentors or people to help you. I get messages and calls all the time from other doctors or even people that are wanting to get into real estate. Like, I don't know what to do. And I'm like, all right, first thing, take a deep breath. You'll be okay. Like you'll be fine. And then second, really have a plan, stick with it, but don't be so stubborn that you don't know when to get out.
Yeah.
The whole gambler's fallacy, right? Like, I've already invested this much time and this much effort. I have 5 offices right now, right? I have I have shut down 3 offices during my career. I started 2 practices that I never even opened because I ran my doctors quit, and or they didn't sign the contract, even though I thought they would. And then I ended up having to fire one doctor, and then I ended up having to work in that office where I thought it was going to be a 3 month thing, and I ended up working at one of my locations for almost 2 years. So I had 2 offices fully staffed, paying on the note, and another really good lesson. And it hurt your pride. It's not the funnest thing to be like, yeah, you know what, I messed up, but it is what it is. You just hopefully learn from your mistakes and don't repeat the same thing over and over again.
I think that is so important. I'm glad you said it because sometimes I'll see like when people, someone will make a post like, I'm having a hard time in my practice, right? And for one reason or another, they got into a bad situation. Maybe they could have avoided it with doing some proper due diligence. And I always cringe when some people they make they give the advice of like, dude, just keep at it, right? Like, just do it, like, just keep pushing through. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, man, this is almost like a hopeless situation. Like, you're better off just like cutting your losses and pivoting and just moving forward. But like a lot of people are like, just keep going. And I think it's so important that you said that because sometimes, I mean, if you look at the most successful people in our country, right? In the history of time, sometimes they get in the situation where they couldn't even, as brilliant as they were, they couldn't get out of it, and they either they filed bankruptcy or they had to close something down, and they moved on to a better situation. They ended up doing really good. But I think like sometimes when people say you got to just go down with the ship like a captain, that can really cause some harm. So I'm glad that you said that. That, you know what, I mean, don't be so stubborn that you're just going to keep going in this one direction no matter what, because sometimes if you think you're going low, you definitely can go a lot lower, right? You
Oh yeah,
definitely, things can definitely get worse.
you don't know where the bottom is sometimes. And I'll tell you, if you really, really hit rock bottom, that is, people say, oh, rock bottom is the foundation that I made to get to where I am today. And I'm telling you, you don't want to be anywhere
Oh
near
gosh.
that. You don't absolutely have to.
So, one thing I wanted to bring up was obviously owning and opening one successful practice, that's a feat in itself. But opening multiple, right? It requires another set of skills, a different mindset, and probably a little extra stomach lining. What are some of the things that you've learned when you started to scale from like one practice to 2 practices to 3 and now to 6? Talk about the levels that you had to go through when you go through. We were joking around. It's like having kids. We were joking around before we went on the air here. And we're like, yeah, one kid, you're like, oh my gosh, right? Then you have another kid. And then after that, it's just you don't even know what's going on right after like the third or fourth
Mm-hmm.
kid, right? So talk about the level, how you had to level up each level each time you open another location. What kind of
So,
skills that you had to had to acquire?
yeah. So this is probably going to come off, and this is my experience with it, right? Uh, the easiest way I can explain it is I realized as I wanted to grow that I did not know everything that there was to know about dentistry. Okay. About, or at least the business side of it. Okay. And what I mean by that is I see this a lot in a lot of dental groups, that dentists will be like, well, no, I do this job in my office because I don't believe in office managers, or I can do that better than this person, or I can do that better than that person. And the old analogy is if you walk into a room and you're the smartest person there, you're in the wrong room, right?
Yes.
I am very well aware that there were certain things in practice, front office administration, that I did not know, I couldn't handle. I'm absolutely horrible with insurance and understanding it, right? So I hired people and put them in the positions that allowed me to grow, right? Did it affect my bottom line in the beginning? Yes. I tell people, I have a pretty nice life now. I drive really nice cars, but there was a period after I got divorced that I was commuting to my offices in a 2000 Lincoln Continental, right? Because that was my commute car. I mean, I didn't have anything nicer, but I saw the value and I knew where I wanted to go. And once again, I'm grateful that I wasn't on social media seeing other doctors driving Porsches and stuff that were my age, because I probably would have lost my mind,
Oh
like
God.
literally lost my mind. But I, as we grew, I just always knew that I wasn't the one that needed to know everything. I would put the people in the right places and leave it up to them to do it. I mean, obviously, I would watch over it, but I wasn't the one doing it. And I think that's a very important lesson that people have to realize when it comes to scaling is you can't scale it on your own. You have to have a team.
That is such that's such time, like it's a timeless advice that you gave there, right? Like we've read stories of all these great entrepreneurs, and they always talk about like I have people who are smarter than me, that are better at me at certain things, and I get those smart people to work under me and have the same vision. We hear these things all the time, we read it all the time, but yet and I'm sure that when you read some of these stories online, you probably just want to just grab your keyboard and smash it in your head because you're thinking like someone's trying to be too cheap. They want to cheap their way. They want to cheap their way. Like, oh yeah, I don't want to get an office manager. I don't want to hire this person. I want to do this, or I'll do it myself. Right? I'm sure each time you read that, you're thinking, dude, what are you doing? Right? I'm sure it drives you nuts because you see it all the time. People are like, oh, I do it myself. I do, I'll do my verifications myself. And I'm like, are you insane? Like, how do you feel when you read that, when other practice owners are trying to just do other, either micromanage or just doing things that they shouldn't be doing?
I mean, it depends on what your vision is. I mean, there are, from a personality trait standpoint, look, my mother's a dentist. My mother is that doctor that does everything herself. She doesn't even have a hygienist because she doesn't think a hygienist can properly do what they're supposed to do. And I absolutely adore every one of my hygienists because I see the value in it. And you can't make people change the way that they see things, but you can point out, like, look, if this is what your model is and this is what your goal is, you're not doing it the way you probably should. And it gets a little annoying. I'm on some other groups and like chat groups and everything, and we'll be messaging, and someone will be like, "Oh yeah, I did this and I did all that," and "Oh, why are you so lazy and you don't even know any of that? You don't do any of it." And I'm like, I don't do it out of being lazy. I do it because if I want to grow,
Yeah.
I there's no way I can do it. And when you grow to a certain point, you have one person that's doing a lot of this. Now you realize, now I need to have two people that are doing it. So it's, you have to have that growth mindset, especially if you want to have multiple practices.
Absolutely. Now, I do have a question here, and that is, do you still have that 2000 Lincoln?
No, I got rid of the 2000 Lincoln. it's probably a story I wouldn't want to tell on social media, really.
The
But
only reason
let's
why I
just
bring that up is because Jeff Bezos has his first desk, his first office. And it's true. He still has this desk that literally they made from scratch. They made it from like scrap wood and whatnot, and he still has that when he first started Amazon. I thought that was a cool. I thought it would be kind of a cool story if he still had like
oh,
the
I mean,
Lincoln.
I'm not gonna lie. It was a thought that had crossed through my mind, but someone I went out one night and someone decided to get sick in my car, and that was the end of that car.
I guess
Like,
that would have brought a different memory back, you know.
yeah,
But
yeah.
I thought it would also be cool too. Is teach the kids a little humility. And here you go, your first car is this Lincoln, you know.
No, my kids remember. They're not, I mean, some of them were, gosh, 2012. My oldest daughter was 7 at the time, and she remembers it. And she always would be like, Dad, why are you driving this car to work? Like, I don't understand. Like, you're gone. And, and I'll tell you this was one of the hardest things to deal with. Um, like I said, this wasn't all wins all the time,
Yeah.
but I was gone a lot, and after my divorce, I had full custody of my kids. And because just the way this business was structured wasn't in to be a single dad, right? I had people taking care of my kids, but I didn't think that was the right thing to do. So I had my kids move with my mom and dad to California. For about 2.5 years, they did that. But for 2.5 years, every weekend, I flew out to California. Every Thursday night I was there, and I left every Sunday, and then I did the whole thing all over again.
Wow.
And my youngest daughter, when she knew I was driving this car and I didn't even have a house, I basically lived in different hotels because I had 4 offices at the time, or 3 offices at the time, and I was working in all of them. She's like, Dad, why are you doing all of this? Like, we don't get to see you, and you're not even driving a really cool car. Like, why? And I told her, I'm like, we all have to, you know, life isn't easy. And if you have a vision, sometimes you have to make those sacrifices. And, I think I've made up to them at this point because now I spoil them ridiculously rotten. But at the time, it was a real awakening
Yeah.
because, having a 7-year-old ask you that question is kind of, that's a deep thing, man. That's a tough thing to explain to a 7-year-old. And you're not wanting to throw their mother under the bus and be like, well, we would have had a lot more if I didn't give your mother $1 million, but ask her,
Yeah.
but you know, you just try to be positive and, at least if anything, set a good work example for them, work ethic for them.
Well, I think, I mean, especially now, the fact that they saw you go from just starting out, right? And they were old enough to see that, old enough to remember the Lincoln, right?
Hmm.
And then now seeing here, I mean, they they firsthand saw they got a first, front row seat of like a lesson in grit and determination. Um, and again, like I know we brought this up earlier, but they do you guys ever talk about that? Like, hey, back then and stuff like that. I know they talk about the car, but do you guys still talk about it at all? Like, did you ever bring up
No,
some
not
examples from them?
honestly, not so much. We try not to. One of the guiding principles of my life, honestly, has always been stop looking back and
Yeah,
like look forward. You can look back and use lessons that you've learned,
yeah,
but looking back all the time, that can that can be a real anchor on your
yeah.
motivation.
I mean, I love it. I love the fact that, again, the best thing we can leave for our kids, right, is like life lessons, right? You can buy them a car, you can give them money, you can do all those things, but giving them some life lessons, especially at that age, those are memories they'll never forget. Those are lessons they'll never forget. So that's awesome. I'm so happy, uh, that I'm not happy that you had to go through that, but I'm happy that you came out from the other side. But be able to share that experience with your kids. I think that's really cool. And on that note, I want to shift gears a little bit. I want to talk about, obviously you're an amazing entrepreneur, right? And there's so many things that you probably could share. I like to do this segment called Entrepreneur Secrets, and so I want to ask you, the first thing is share an entrepreneur tip. It can be efficiency tip or productivity tip, whatever it is, something that you do that you feel could help other like dental entrepreneurs, like a habit
I
or a
mean,
tip.
really, I kind of already touched on it a little
Yeah.
bit, but it really is be humble. Okay. Don't think that you know everything. Okay. One of my favorite quotes of all time is by Isaac Newton. Okay. And it's, if I have seen farther than others, it is because I have stood on the shoulders of giants. Okay. Now, to me personally, giants don't mean other professional giants. Everybody is a master at something if you get to know them.
Yeah.
Okay. When I when I first graduated and I ended up moving to Missouri, the office that I was in was a denture clinic. Okay. We did extractions, regular or surgical, for $50 a tooth. Didn't matter. And our dentures were $299 because we had a denture technician that was next door. Coming out of dental school, I did 3 sets of dentures. Right. The very first day I showed up and I looked at my schedule, we had 9 sets of dentures
Dang.
that were supposed to be delivered or started. And I looked at it and I had my book, I had my pamphlets, and I'm like, oh my God, how am I gonna do this? And the denture technician that was working there, his name was Tito. Okay. This guy looks at me and goes, all right, Doc, you're new. You look really young. I'm like, Tito, I don't know anything about dentures. Like, I don't know nearly enough dentures. He's like, you listen to me, man. You listen to Tito, and he was Puerto Rican from Queens, right? So he had that, that accent, right?
Yeah.
He's like, Doc, you listen to me. I will make you the best denture dentist in the world. And I took him up on that offer. I would go during lunch, I'd hang out with him, and he'd explain to me the stuff that he would do, right? Now, the thing about Tito was he's illiterate. He couldn't read the lab slips, right? He couldn't even type the names into the denture. They had to hire somebody to do it, right? And the thing was, people would probably think, well, I'm a doctor. I just graduated. I spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in school. I'm not going to listen to an illiterate denture tech tell me how to do dentures, right? But that was never my philosophy. I was like, man, this guy obviously knows his stuff. So a lot of my success, because I still do, I think as a company, we probably do 300 arches of dentures a month, right? Like we do a lot of dentures, and a lot of the staff and a lot of the doctors, I've taught them myself how to take impressions, how to get a bite, how to do this. And all of that came from Tito,
Wow.
right? So that's probably the best advice I can give anybody. And I tell my kids this and I tell everybody this is be humble about yourself, right? If you see somebody, there might be a janitor cleaning your office that, yeah, maybe he likes being a janitor. Maybe that's not what he wanted to do. Maybe he made some horrible mistakes in his life. But I guarantee you, if you talk to this person and you
Yeah.
get to know this person, there's going to be some tidbit of information that you may get out of it that you might not use now, but you might use in the future. So that's the best take home message I can give.
Yeah. That's amazing advice because again, you can always learn from somebody, right? You can learn from everybody. And I think if you're humble and you have an open mind, you'll be able to get so much great knowledge, right? And again, if you were like some other doc who felt like you're much better than Tito, you probably wouldn't have gotten all that information. That stuff that you still use today, man. I mean, you still
Mm-hmm.
use today and teach other docs. I love that. Now, again, if you're like me, you've made your fair share of mistakes, right? You've already talked about a few of those things, but but share like a mistake that you made that you learned something very significant from that other people can learn something from as well.
Well, the first one I will tell you is pick your partners wisely. Okay. Because you have no idea the amount of strain, and not even financial strain it can do, but the psychological strain can
Yeah.
be absolutely horrible. Okay. Uh, so learn from there. Mo- Moving forward outside of that, from a business perspective, trust your gut. You know, a lot of times I look back and a lot of the mistakes that I made were things that I knew probably weren't right, but either someone talked me into it or I wasn't confident about myself. And, you know, I'm not saying don't listen to the opinions of others. Listen, right? But just because you're listening to them doesn't mean you have to do it either, you know? And stay calm. You know, I mean, really, life happens, man. Like, and it'll hit you from nowhere. But some of the worst mistakes I've ever made were because I felt like I was rushed and I had to do something. I had to react
Yeah.
right there. And inevitably, every single time I've done that, it just ended up being a disaster.
I think that's true for everybody. I think I think when you start freaking out and you just react to something without just calmly thinking it through, it's always some kind of disaster. So that's amazing advice, especially also the one about the partners, whether it's a life partner, whether it's a business partner. Those things you really need to put some thought into it. You really need to because again, it just affects everything in your life. So that is amazing advice there. Now, for those who are listening, they're like, okay, man, this guy is someone I want to connect, I want to learn more from. What's the best way? Obviously, you're really big on social media. Obviously, if someone reaches out to me, I'm going to introduce them to you. But for people, if they just want to pick your brain, they would just want to ask you a question, or maybe they're going through something, they would just want to get your opinion. We know you're a busy guy, but you've always made time to help others. What's the best way for them to reach out?
Honestly, so there's not a lot of Arrash Ahmadnias on Facebook. So if you just type it in and add me as a friend or just send me a Facebook message request, I'll get back to you. I always do. And you know, I enjoy helping other people out because I didn't get the benefit of that when I was younger, but I didn't even know. I mean, this is going to sound insane. I didn't know the dental Facebook groups even existed up until about 4 years ago. Had no idea.
Wow.
I was at a dental meeting and someone was like, "Oh yeah, I saw this on this group and I saw this on this group." And I'm like, "What are you guys talking about?" They're like, "Yeah, this dental group, you know, they're talking about this." And I was like, there's dental groups on Facebook, and one of them just added me right there. He just added me, and then I looked and I was like, oh, okay. So I started chatting, and then I started getting into real estate, and someone's like, oh, if you like real estate, you need to go to this dental group
Yeah.
because you know, and I don't know if I can give names or anything, but I'll just keep it generic. But oh, this real estate group deals a lot with dentists, and I was like, oh, okay, let me add that. And then, like, you know, between this, your group, and all these other groups that I've been in, I owe a lot of my success and a lot of my sanity to it, you know. And like I said, I pick and choose. I'm not going to just, you know, obsess over the highlight reels of X, Y, and Z doctor. But, you know, there's so much information out there. And I am so fortunate to have gotten it when I did. I mean, I bought my first house in real estate 3 years ago, right? Just one house, and it was my ex. It was for my ex-wife, so that she had a place to live because she squandered all her money and she needed a place to live. And I'm like, all right, how about this? I'll buy a house and you rent it from me. And I'll get a little bit of my alimony back because I'm stuck paying alimony for the rest of my life. but at least I know you'll live in a nice home and the kids will have a nice
Yes.
place to come visit you, right? So from that one house, now I have, like, 3.5 years later, I have 9 homes, 2 apartment complexes, a mini storage, one shopping center. I'm developing another shopping center, and then I'm in the process of negotiating. I'm under contract for another shopping center too in 3.5 years. So I owe almost all of that entirely to these different Facebook groups. So,
I mean, I
and
100% agree with you, because again, it's so cool to see what's possible. And I think that's the thing too. I mean, without these groups, we'd be in our own little silo and just only being in that little room that we have. But now with these groups, we're in a big room with a bunch of cool people doing cool things. I mean, I just learned some credit card hacks that I just, hooked myself up with a nice vacation next Christmas. So hey, I just saved a ton of money just hanging around. That's what I love about this.
yeah, right. No kidding.
So Rush, before we end this podcast here, I always ask someone the same question. That is, how do you feel about this future of dentistry? Do you feel optimistic or pessimistic?
I feel actually really optimistic about it. I view dentistry more as an opportunity for a lot of people, and really the opportunity. So my daughter is going into college next year, and I'm telling her to go into dentistry. Now whether she wants to or not, that's up to her. But I think the beautiful thing about dentistry is it provides a very good lifestyle, and it really, independent of what direction you want to go. As an associate, I mean, there are good associate jobs and there's bad associate jobs, but that's like it for any career, right? If you don't want to have the headache of ownership and you just are glad working 8 to 5 or 9 to 5 and making a good amount of money, that opportunity is there and it will always be there. But if you're more entrepreneur based, the sky's the limit. You can go in any direction you want. You can do part-time, you can do full-time. If you want to focus on your family, you can do that. Like, I'm excited about it. I do worry about the cost of the education. That's a little
Yeah.
amazing, but I think at the end it will probably be reflected on the reimbursements that owners, if you are an associate, you know, owners are probably just going to have to pay you more to stay in those offices. I mean, we pay $1,000 a day as a guarantee. So, that if you owe a bunch of money, that was always a helpful thing for them. But I also had to drive people into Southwest Missouri. So, but I think that'll catch on the coasts. I think that'll catch on in your bigger cities like in Texas and Chicago and those areas too. The economics of it will drive it through. So don't just look at it as a snapshot of right now. What is it like? Look forward, look into the future.
I love it. And guys, if you want to reach out, I'll make sure I have some info in the show notes about Dr. Arrash. And again, there's not that many people with that name. In fact, I want to say that, like, he's like the only one. There's another person, but it's spelled a little bit different. But he's for sure the only dentist with that name, right? So reach out to him. But Arrash, thank you so much for jumping on. Guys, thanks for tuning in. Talk to you guys next time.